looking, good looking, it's the girl Lifrim here and welcome back to my channel.
This video is gonna be a little bit different than usual. I've always been a fan of horror games, although not so much of horror movies because I'm a scaredy cat when it comes to that. And so sometimes I read scary Reddit threads online. I thought it would be a good idea to make content on some stories that I found spooky. If you enjoy my content, feel free to follow my Twitch. I stream almost every day at 8 PM EST. I hope you enjoy the stories. The first story is called I Used to Work at a 25/7 motel. It starts off strong, with the user warning us to not go close to any 25/7 motels under any circumstances. For the story's sake, I'll call him Bob. Bob was just a normal guy that really needed some good money, so he applied at a 25/7 motel. When he came in for the interview, he didn't find anything odd. It was a normal motel, clean and peaceful, and the manager seemed nice. After the interview, the manager offered him the job and Bob obviously accepted since it was a nice check after all. He would start working at reception from 23 PM to 7 AM the day after. The job was simple enough: greet everyone with a smile and give them the key to the room. The next day, Bob went to work half an hour before his shift. His manager welcomed him in and started giving him some information on what he should expect. Before he left Bob for the rest of the shift, he turned around and said to him, "Just one more thing. If any guests come during the 25th hour, you have to follow some advice on the list in your drawer." Bob thought he was just messing with him. After all, what was the 25th hour? How could guests come during this unknown hour? "I mean it," he said in a serious tone and then left. After that encounter, Bob got really bored. There weren't a lot of guests. He only checked in one truck driver and one young couple during the whole night, so he had time to scroll through Reddit on his phone. The night was peaceful, and soon 6 AM arrived. When the manager came in the morning, he was satisfied to hear that there were no problems during the shift. On the second day, Bob went to work again. While he was waiting for his shift to start, he had a conversation with the manager. They both had a lot of similar interests, and the manager seemed like a cool guy, but in the middle of chatting, he asked Bob if he had read the paper in the drawer. Bob didn't want to do it, but the manager urged him to do so as soon as the shift started. When it finally began and no one was coming in, he took the time to read through the list. Here it is. Rule number 1. Guests that wear outfits from the 1800s. They are mostly harmless. Avoid eye contact and be polite with them. They will be grateful for the room. Rule number 2. Guests that claim that they come from a non-existing country. Follow the same protocol as with number 1. Rule number 3. Guests that look injured. They might seem like injured people, but they aren't. Insist that they can't stay and should go see a doctor. They will leave quickly. Rule number 4. Guests that came for business meeting. Welcome them to the motel and tell them that there are no available rooms. They could yell a bit, but are mostly harmless. Rule number 5. Guest that stands in the lobby and stares at you. This one rarely happens, but is most dangerous. If this happens, take the gun from under the desk and aim for the head. It should do the trick. Rule number 6. Any other guests. They shouldn't come at this time, but if they do come, call your manager on this number. For the safety of the hotel, please follow the rules. Bob thought this must be some kind of twisted prank. He finished reading the paper and put it back in the drawer. It was all pretty weird, but at least he had something to think about while waiting. The next hour went by as usual. He was playing a game on his phone when he noticed something. The clock in the lobby struck 13 times. It shouldn't have been possible, but he thought that someone was playing a prank on him. When Bob looked back at his phone, that's when he realized that even though his phone worked as always, there was something different. It showed 25:01. Bob felt panic taking over him, but he forced himself to remain calm. The air was suddenly cold and there was some kind of eerie feeling taking over the building. Bob turned on his phone to play a game to calm himself, and everything was still normal. When he got up to grab a bag of chips from the vending machine in the lobby, he saw a person entering the motel. The customer looked normal, so he hurried back to his desk to welcome them. He was a polite guy in his 30s. When Bob asked him where he was from, the man told him that he was from a country that Bob had never heard of. When he typed it on the computer, which is a standard check-in process, he remembered something. Rule number 2. Bob tried to Google the country, but unfortunately there were no results. He He then handed the key to the customer and took him to the room while keeping his own head low. When the man finally entered the room, Bob felt so relieved. The whole experience wasn't so scary. It was just rather shocking to find out that this was real. The 25th hour ended soon and the rest of the night went by normally. In the morning, Bob told his manager everything and he got his bonus, and even received a nice tip. So Bob decided to keep working at the motel because the pay was good and night visitors seemed to be harmless. Everything went smoothly for the next few weeks until one night, a guy started staring at Bob. He had just sent a guy with a broken arm away when he felt someone was looking at him. A man wearing a business suit was staring directly in his eyes. He didn't remember what he had to do if there was someone staring at him during the 25th hour. Bob slowly reached for the gun under his desk. He took the pistol and aimed at the stranger. The scariest thing was that he didn't seem to be bothered by the gun. The man just stood there staring at Bob with his... Wait. The guy had no eyes! He pulled the trigger, and what happened next was unbelievable. The customer simply just turned around and walked out with a bullet hole in his head. At that moment, Bob decided that if he wouldn't make it out of this night alive, he would quit first thing in the morning. Whatever he was welcoming at the motel was definitely not human, and he was not planning on finding out what specifically they were. Bob fortified the break room and waited for the sunrise. He somehow survived. When his manager came in the morning, he didn't have to ask what had happened. Bob collected his bonus and left. After a while, he had completely forgotten about this place ever since that shift. One night, he was traveling and he stopped at a motel. He was feeling very tired from the trip, so he just went to his room. Bob had an uneasy feeling that this motel looked familiar, but he didn't think much about it. That was until he got woken up in the middle of the night by a gunshot and a scream. He immediately locked his door and put a desk against it. When he decided to call reception, that's when Bob saw something terrifying. The clock on his phone showed that it was 25:18. That was the reason that motel seemed so familiar. It was the motel Bob used to work at. And then, he heard a loud bang on the door in the hallway. At the time that he wrote this post, it was 25:48. The thing has not stopped banging on the doors. A few screams were heard in the last half hour, and Bob still had to hide in his room for 12 minutes. His last sentence is, "Maybe it somehow broke in our world. I just hope that I will make it out alive." The next story is titled, "I think my strange neighbors didn't kidnap my cat." It begins with a user introducing themselves. His name is Lucas. Lucas is a normal person that lives in a normal small town. He likes his peaceful routine, taking long walks in nature, basking in the sun, and he enjoys his life as he works from home. However, his family is completely the opposite. They thrive on hustle, noise, and crowds. Because of that, Lucas moved to a small town and adopted a cat to not feel so lonely. Mr. Munchkin, his cat, was perfect. He knew how to take care of his business in the backyard, burying it far away from home, and he even hunted rats and other small animals that might steal food. His company was very comforting, especially on summer nights when Lucas sat on the porch, gazing at the stars in the clear sky alongside Mr. Munchkin. However, things began to change when a new family moved into the house next door, the Petersons. They were normal. Too normal. And that's what bothered Lucas. The family consisted of a father, a mother, a son, and a daughter. All impeccable, the father in a well-pressed suit, the mother with a radiant smile wearing a flared dress and an apron, the son with his school backpack, a uniform from some baseball team, and the daughter in her princess dress. It was something you would expect from a movie family, like asking an AI to create the perfect family without giving specific details. It was somehow eerie. The following days were as usual, with Mr. Munchkin patrolling the backyard and Lucas working on his projects. But Lucas began to notice small changes. His cat started to act more reclusive, even skittish. He used to come running to greet Lucas when he came home, but now it's like he was avoiding his presence. He also stopped visiting the yard as often. Lucas had to buy a litter box. He thought at first that it was because Mr. Munchkin was anxious about the presence of the new neighbors. And speaking of the neighbors, it was very easy to notice that they were rarely seen leaving the house, almost always keeping the curtains closed. At night sometimes, we could hear murmurs coming from their house as if they were talking quietly. But the last straw of strangeness was when Lucas saw Mr. Peterson sitting in the backyard, alone on a full moon night. He was facing away from Lucas, but his rigid posture and the way he remained motionless was terrifying. It was like he was staring fixedly into the darkness. The next day, Mr. Munchkin disappeared. It was pretty worrying because, although as Lucas mentioned, Mr. Munchkin did his patrols, they were always within the property, behind the fences, and he would always come back every night to sleep in the house. Lucas decided to search for him around the neighborhood, calling his name in vain. He asked the neighbors except the Petersons, but no one had seen anything. Finally, Lucas knocked on the door of the house next door, the Petersons. When Lucas asked if they had seen his cat, the men hesitated for a moment before responding. "Oh, Mr. Munchkin, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm not sure I've seen him around here, but we'll keep an eye out, okay? I'm sure he'll turn out." His response was polite, but there was something off. He finished speaking and stood there, still, inert, looking at Lucas. There was something wrong. Still, Lucas thanked him and stepped back. Despite Mr. Peterson's seemingly reassuring words, a sense of unease settled within Lucas. His smile seemed forced and his eyes moved rapidly, making it very uncomfortable. It might have been paranoia, but something about that encounter wasn't right. Lucas decided to follow his instinct, and that afternoon, when the street was deserted and the Petersons were out, he decided to investigate. He saw their car turning the corner at the end of the street, all four of them inside. Silence reigned in the house. Lucas cautiously entered the backyard, feeling guilty for doing so, but the concern for Mr. Munchkin and the thought of what might be happening to him outweighed his hesitation. The house was as immaculate inside as it was outside, with furniture and details that seemed to have come out of a home decor magazine. Everything seemed too perfect to be true. As Lucas rummaged through the rooms of the house, the feeling of being watched haunted him. He looked through the living room, kitchen, even ventured into the bedrooms, where he was disturbed to see what Mr. and Mrs. Peterson had hidden. Numerous family portraits, and the gaze of all of them was directed towards a door. Lucas then noticed something strange about them. In all of them, the people were the same, but the surroundings weren't.
What's so strange about that? Wouldn't it be weird to have thousands of photos with the same setting?
While you would be right, this case was on another level. The photos seemed very, very old. There were things from the 80s, 70s, 60s. Lucas even found a hand-painted portrait from that time before the photos. And in all of them, they were the same, as if they didn't age. It was when a noise snapped Lucas out of this dream, or I should say, nightmare. A muffled, low but unmistakable sound. A meow! He was tense, but also relieved to hear the meow. It was proof that Mr. Munchkin was somewhere around. Lucas followed the sound, and it led him to a fearful place. The one that he had been deliberately avoiding. The basement. The meows intensified as he came closer. I don't know how many of you have cats, but they meow differently depending on the situation. And the little feline friend was meowing in fear. It was urgent. Lucas opened the creaky door and was greeted by a gust of hot, humid air, a strong smell of mold. He followed the meow, now clearer. Lucas supposed he was huddled in a corner, scared, so he began to head towards the back of the room. As his eyes started to adjust slowly to the darkness, he stopped walking. He had to appear calm, but panic had consumed Lucas' mind. He saw, with the little light he had, a figure, strange, contorted, but much larger than a cat. It had something resembling a head, which began to turn towards him. He couldn't see its eyes, but it was as if they were on Lucas. He saw it move, opening its mouth, and then a meow sound echoed from its throat. This time, he could hear it clearly, and it was much deeper, distorted. I'll be back, Mr. Munchkin, stuttered Lucas, as he backed away, still facing whatever was in front of him. But when he saw it move, he ran without even looking back, slamming the basement door and jumping out of the side window of the house as fast as he could. However, his great panic came now. As Lucas jumped over the Petersons' fence and finally entered his backyard, he saw a furry, small, curious figure on the balcony railing. It was Mr. Munchkin, wagging his fluffy tail. Lucas looked back, seeing the fence, imagining what was on the other side. He ran upstairs to where his cat was. As Mr. Munchkin was snuggling against Lucas' hand, that's when his phone vibrated. A message from the lady from the next street. The text said, "Hey dear, your cat showed up here this morning, but I couldn't reach you. I gave him food and helped him over the fence. I saw the lights turning on. Are you home? Is he okay?" Lucas messaged the lady back, thanking her for looking after his cat. Now, Lucas and Mr. Munchkin are here on the second floor. The sun has set and only the pale light of the moon is making its appearance. It's one of those warm nights, but they're not looking up at the sky, but down. The Petersons' car is parked in front of the house. They've been there for almost an hour now, sitting motionless like dolls, except for Mr. Peterson, who is now staring directly at them. The final story for this video is about a man with his daughter, Reed. Reed was born a happy, bubbly girl. She had big blue eyes that shifted into a deep brown growing older and blonde curls that straightened and darkened as she aged. Reed was a quiet girl, sleepy, never fussy, and always up for anything. At the age of 3, she joined a kindergarten named Miss Blue's Adventure Emporium. Miss Blue was always so kind to Reed. She said she was the best behaved student in the entire school, which consisted of 12 kids, although she might have said that to everyone. And yet, her dad couldn't be any more proud of her. For this story, we'll call her dad Joe. When Reed graduated that year, she received a certificate, Best at Being Friendly. It was a copy and paste certificate, meaning every kid had gotten one. Still though, Reed was so proud of herself. She had insisted that her dad place it on the cram fridge door, and it still hangs up there to this day. The various scribbles of rainbows and fairies had been replaced by business cards and school photos, a sign that Reed was growing older. These photos went up until her 4th grade photo, which was of a smiling buck-toothed girl missing her lower cannons. She had a smile plastered across her freckled face, and her long brown hair was still youthful and laying across her shoulders. Joe tried to brush the hair out before the photo, but this had just made it frizzy. It made Reed cry a little, but it didn't stop her excitement for the upcoming photo. The day she started to change was in mid-December of her 4th grade year. She'd come home crying down the front of her butterfly dress. When Joe begged Reed to tell him what was wrong over a cup of hot cocoa, she sniffled out that someone had made fun of her because she doesn't have a mom like they do. Joe adds in the post that Reed's mother had hardly stuck around long enough to hold her for the first day before running off with her boyfriend, a deadbeat mom. "Well, you have a daddy, and you have fish," Joe told his daughter, pointing at the Persian cat, gifted to them by Joe's mother, who enjoyed rescuing cats. Reed loved that buttercup yellow fur ball, but nothing could ever make her forget the loss of her mother.
"I want Mommy to come home. When is she coming home, Daddy? I want to be normal."
Reed screeched, storming into her room with all the sass a 90-year-old could muster. That's when Joe started begging for something, anything, to just let her mother send one birthday card, one Christmas present, anything. When Reed was 2, her mother had sent Joe several cards begging for money. He tossed them into the recycling without opening any after the first one, but they just kept coming and coming. After 6 months, though, they had stopped. That leads us to today. Joe received a package with a neat bow wrapped around the box. Well, it would be neat if it wasn't wrapped messily around the entire box. At least every inch had 2 layers of ribbon. Joe opened it hesitantly. Inside was a doll with short, savagely chopped hair, messy, uneven makeup, and a cruel smile on its pale white face. It was porcelain and was chipped in several places, not ideal to give to a small child. And there were letters, so many letters, pictures too, of Reed that had been screenshotted from Joe's rare posts on Instagram and Facebook, and cut so he was always out of the picture. The pictures posted to Joe's public account always had Reed's face blurred to protect her privacy, though Joe never had that many followers. And when the screenshots were blurred out, her mother had shoddily drawn on a horrific imagining of Reed's face. wrapped with either tears or some other liquid substance. The faces seemed to be laughing and overly ecstatic. It was all so wrong. She'd added clippings of her own deep brown hair to Reed's own lighter brown hair as if to hide the fact that Reed had gained Joe's light brunette hair. It was the same for every picture. Her hair was replaced, her face shape rounded out with a yellow crayon, her clothes had even been changed to different colors using magazine's clippings. Joe felt himself gag. One picture was Reed's mother laying in Reed's bed. Beside her, the clock read 3:30 a.m. Reed was snuggling her and smiling at the camera. She was awake and overjoyed. The picture was dated March 9, 2017. Reed was 2 when this picture was taken. She was a toddler, an infant. Joe felt himself heave and rush for the sink. My ex-girlfriend was breaking into my house to be with my daughter, Joe thought to himself. He wiped away tears. There were more pictures, more and more, dating back to the day Joe brought Reed home. He wasn't a couple too. Knives pointed at him, guns and some, or rope. He saw one with her smiling as she feigned dumping bleach into his open mouth. She had left a note too, scrawled with deep black ink in hasty writing. The note had this written on it: "I'll be with you soon, sweetie. Where your awful, terrible dad won't ever take you away again. Wouldn't you like that, honey? To live with me forever. We live on and on like superheroes. We never even die, as your real daddy did." He's not your real daddy. I know who your real daddy is. Write me back that you want to see me tonight. I love you with all my heart, Mommy. And that's all that there is to this post. Well, that's all there is to these stories. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me reading them as much as I did. Let me know if you like this kind of concepts for videos, and I will definitely make more. If you've made it this far into the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment as well. Tell me which story scared you the most. And I will see you on the next one, my fellow chicken milk enthusiasts. Bye bye! Lucas is a normal person that lives in... oh my god. Lucas is a normal person that lives in a Oh dude!